Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. This is your host, Darren, and we're here to help you find and get into the world's best MBA programs. I thought this week we'd switch up the format a little bit. Usually we have admissions directors on the show and we talk about, what makes their program unique, and we talk through their admissions process. But I think it's useful to take a step back every once in a while and really think through why an MBA. Is an MBA the best degree for you? And so this week I had a very special guest, Professor Franz Heukamp, who is a professor of Managerial Decision Sciences and the Associate Dean for MBA Programs at IESE Business School, based in Spain. And IESE is one of the top-ranked programs in the world. The Financial Times ranked it number 7 this year, and it's a top 3 program in Europe. So I sat down with Professor Franz and had an earnest chat about why get an MBA in the first place, and what's the difference between a 1-year MBA and a 2-year MBA, and what should candidates be thinking about when approaching these two different types of programs. Can an MBA help you become a better entrepreneur? And what are his thoughts on the future of the MBA degree as well and its value in the marketplace? So this is more of a meta chat about the MBA degree. I think you'll find it useful and informative. And if you need help finding the best MBA programs for you, go head over to touchmba.com, and we'd love to give you some free school selection help there. On to the episode. Professor Franz, thank you very much for your time and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I've heard about it already, so I'm very pleased and honored to be able to address the audience today. You have asked a couple of very important questions, of course, and I will try to see whether I can at least answer them to some extent. I mean, when you ask me, so why should people do an MBA? I think among many other reasons, what an MBA does is, an MBA is a leadership development program. So this is about preparing you and transforming you in your leadership capacities for a future that lies ahead of you, a future that is typically 40, 50 or more years of professional and personal life, a life of a leader. In that context, an MBA provides what I think is a very unique combination of learning opportunities that, of course, some of them exist in other places also naturally, but I think they are offered in a concentrated way in a very unique combination in an MBA program. So we're talking about, obviously, the knowledge, the business knowledge that you can acquire during an MBA program. We're talking about the specific skills that you can learn there, that go from entrepreneurship, communications, teamwork, and etc. And certainly we also talk about the different attributes that actually mark a leader. So there's a lot of insistence in a good MBA program on, what is leadership really about? Obviously, it's about knowing what you're doing. It's about being competent in what you're doing, but it's also about purpose that you actually give to the different things that you're doing. And I think an MBA program is worthwhile for people who are really thinking about a career as a manager, an entrepreneur, and certainly as a leader. That's, I think, where the value of an MBA comes in. Of course, there are also some midterm objectives that are very well covered through an MBA program. I'm thinking obviously about a career change, a career boost that you will be getting through doing an MBA if you're interested, in getting a job in certain sectors, in geographies, in certain functions that you may not be at right now. Obviously, you can get a lot out from that, so that would be a midterm goal, reason to do an MBA. But I think the overarching reason, and it may not be easy sometimes if you're in your mid to late 20s, let's say, as you're considering doing an MBA program, this is really about how you will approach the rest of your life. I think, the focus that you will be getting, because what an MBA does to a good extent is it really gives you a window of looking at the world, a way of looking at the world through the different things that you will learn in the program, and it will mark, a lot in who you are and what your next step are going to be.
And what would you have to say to applicants who see the MBA as a strictly ROI type of investment? What you said was really amazing. 50 years of a potential career down the road. And I think, a lot of people view the MBA as, will it give me return on the money I put in? Because it is a very expensive degree.
Sure. When you say ROI, you seem to be talking about a financial ROI. And I think the equation for the financial ROI is actually very clear and straightforward. There's a lot of data being published that shows that doing an MBA program in one of the top programs is one of the best financial investments you can actually make. I think we publish, in general, the industry publish very detailed reports on what people were doing before they do the MBA, what are they doing afterwards. And if you factor in the cost of tuition and obviously also foregone earnings during the time of the MBA, I think the MBA in a top tier program, the data shows it's a very high ROI, and this has to be there, and it is there, and it's very important. I just want to also stress that the return, I think, is more than that. Without wanting to diminish the importance of the financial return, the return of an MBA, I think, goes way beyond the financial.
And could you expand upon what you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that really is that if you're asking yourself the question of how am I actually doing as a manager, an entrepreneur, a leader in any kind of professional or private situation that I'm in, and how will the program affect me in this? And then I think it's what happens in a good MBA program, and I certainly try in our MBA program to make this happen, is that the program will be truly transformational for you as a person. You do look at the world differently afterwards. You will be a more mature leader. You will have a more reflective mindset about what's going on in the businesses or part of the organization that you will be managing. And if you are out to actually positively change the world, which is what I think is the case for most people, really, at the bottom of their heart, certainly, and also in this lifetime that we're in, mid to end 20s, people are enthusiastic about that, and I think they should be. Then I think the answer is that you will see that you will get the tools, you'll get the knowledge, you get also the experience that you learn from different examples of things that have worked and have not worked in the world, companies, NGOs, projects, to really say, okay, how can I put my grain of sand to actually improve the world, really? So in that sense, I think there's a return there. Like, you will be a different person, and you will be put in a position to actually have a much bigger impact in this world.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really love about IESE program, is that I know you're very much a mission-driven organization, and that's really at the core of what you try to do in your MBA program. How do you do that in a span of 19 months or 2 years? How can you really help someone change the worldview, as you say? And what should people, what should applicants look out for in MBA programs if they want to have such an experience?
Yeah. I think the main tools that we really use is, I would say, feedback and mentoring. It's obviously you need good classes, good coursework that actually provides ideas, examples, and so forth. But the really inner transformation takes place in the moment when you are being challenged by ideas, but you also receive a lot of feedback on how are you actually doing personally. How good are you at certain things in the leadership world? How good are you at interacting with people, for example? How good are you really at communicating? How good are you at transmitting ideas? How good are you at motivating other people? Mm-hmm. When you receive consistent feedback on that in different ways, I'm thinking here in the first place about the teams that we have. We organize a structured peer feedback process where peers from, because a very international program from all parts of the world and very different backgrounds will give you feedback on that. And we have a structured mentoring process where you have one of the faculty members is your mentor throughout the entire MBA program. And there are regular personal meetings going on, and of course a lot of input from other parts of the program into this meeting. So you get a chance to really understand, number one, how you're doing, who you are, and also to work, with the mentor and also other people in the program on how to establish development goals, how to actually work towards those goals, see how you're doing midterm, and move forward from there. Obviously, 19 months is still a short time. I mean, you already said you wanted to talk about difference between 2 and 1 year programs.
Yes.
You point out that how can you do this in 19 months? So the answer is, I think this is a time where you have a strong and very intensive impact, but it's obviously in many ways a starting point also. It's like you start to see the world in a different way. And many obviously of the improvements and learning points of the MBA program are actually released as you work later in your career post MBA, and really things unfold for you. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to be, I think we shouldn't want to be over ambitious, of course, of what we can really do in 19 months, but I think we are giving a strong impulse in this direction. But to sort of come back to, so how do we actually do this? Of course, there is, as in any MBA program, we have coursework where knowledge transmission. There's a lot of skills workshops that are going on. But the critical part is actually to kind of weave things together, to make sure that the knowledge pieces are not just floating out there by themselves, that the skills are not just taught one individually, but that you kind of create a context where things come together. And this is where the mentorship process comes in. I think it's really key, because the different elements are weaving together. And because as a leader, you are one person, and all these things come together in your person, and they somehow also define you. In that same way, you need to get some feedback and goals. You need to set some goals that are also of this really unified nature. That's what we're trying to do in this mentorship process, which I think is quite unique. Very time consuming, but very important for the MBA program.
So it sounds like self-awareness and getting a lot of feedback, not just from your peers in the class, but proven leaders, proven academic specialists, faculty, is really the key to understand yourself and what you want to do. And that's core of what IESE is trying to do. And I mean, what would you say to applicants who feel like they should pursue a 1-year program because they get the degree quickly and then they can get back into the workforce? That's the common argument for the 1-year MBA. But as you mentioned, you guys have a 19-month program. And so, what are the benefits of that additional time?
Yes. I mean, I perfectly understand. No, we certainly, if we're thinking about the immediate career progression that we're looking for, and you're concerned about how can I finance an MBA, the additional foregone earnings if I do a 2-year or 19 months versus a 1-year program. I think those are obviously very serious issues. And there is a place, obviously, for 1-year programs. I would say certainly if you are working in a certain industry and your plan is to basically return to the same industry and maybe even in the beginning the same job, so you're not looking really for a significant change also in what you're going to do. There's a place for that, for shorter programs. I think what is clear is if you're really talking about transformation, about deep leader impact on you as a future leader, it's very hard to do this if you just have 1 year, simply because you're trying to cover the basics of business knowledge, which requires some time. You want to cover obviously you need to do some skills development. And there's just so much time, and at some point you just have to say, okay, I can't do more here on this. If you have a 2-year MBA program, what you can do is you can insist a lot on actually piecing the different elements together and construct this obviously very coherent view of what your goals should be and how to go forward. We always say in our MBA program, we have a first year. It's quite demanding, and it's curriculum that is required, all required courses. In the second year, we offer courses that are all electives. So you have a chance really through those choices to tailor this process of putting the different things that you have learned together in a meaningful way along the different needs that you have. It also means you can prepare better for certain careers that you are actually aspiring to right off the MBA. So you can actually also specialize a little bit more. You can say, for example, I want to be a person who really knows a lot about emerging markets and do corresponding coursework plus our overseas modules that we have, for example, in some of those key markets. Or you could say, I really want to be a specialist in entrepreneurial finance and will, do the corresponding coursework. Or, of course, you may be an aspiring entrepreneur and you may want to benefit from the very unique opportunities that you have in an MBA to actually develop your own business, and their time also plays in your favor. So in short, I would say that it may look like a lot of extra time at that moment in your life, but I think it's a really good investment because you don't stop short in this transformational process when it has really just started, and you don't miss out on this opportunity to really get deep in this transformational process.
That's great. And I mean, I think a lot of candidates that come to Touch MBA really plan to start their own businesses at some point, or they have entrepreneurial ambitions. And that's really related to what you just mentioned, that one of the focuses of your program is entrepreneurship. And of course, if we go to business publications on the web or even in print, there's always this argument, are entrepreneurship and MBAs opposed to one another? Do you have to get an MBA to become an entrepreneur? I'd just love to hear your thoughts there on how your school prepares its students to start their own businesses or become better entrepreneurs.
Yes. I think the answer to the question, do you have to do an MBA to become an entrepreneur, is clearly no. Everybody knows very, very famous examples of very successful entrepreneurs that have not studied for an MBA. So it's clear that's not a necessary requirement. This being said, I think there are very few places as good and as favorable for actually trying out your own ideas and sort of putting the first seeds in the ground and see them grow as an MBA. So I think you have the opportunity to actually set up your first business ideas, to write your first business plan. You get a lot of feedback on that from very experienced people. Those are some faculty, obviously, but also experienced entrepreneurs that are part of the entrepreneurship, let's say, ecosystem that actually existed at our school. And that's very valuable feedback that you would have probably a hard time to find in this, say, friendly and somewhat non-risk atmosphere anywhere else. So this system, I think, this ecosystem is quite an ideal place, I would say, to actually start your first business, to plant the first seeds and to try out things, basically. And there's also obviously something to be said about the general entrepreneurial skills that are good for any manager and leader to, even if you never want to do your own business, but that are still very valuable and that can be taught. And I think that's where also an MBA program can add a lot of value. Again, even if you want to work in a large organization that few people would call entrepreneurial, those organizations are looking for people who actually do have entrepreneurial skills, who are able to start new initiatives, who are flexible, who are willing to innovate. And knowledge about those processes are actually, this knowledge is actually being taught in an MBA program, and you have the opportunity to do some project works on this. So in other words, you get a lot out of learning towards entrepreneurial skills, I would say, in an MBA program. And then, of course, what MBA schools also provide is a little bit this framework and so a whole net of people that are working in entrepreneurial ventures that can help you guide through the process. There are funds, angel investment funds, for example, that are willing to listen to an alumnus when they come to present their first ideas. So you get good feedback there. And obviously, if you have a good idea, you may get funding there. And again, that's, I think, another value added that an MBA program, and where MBA programs are simply part of the bigger entrepreneurship culture that clearly is starting to grow in society, I would say.
We're lucky to have you here. So one other question I wanted to ask was to get your thoughts on the future of the MBA degree. Do you think it will have the same relevance and importance has had in the past? Do you see it changing in any way? And I guess, what does your school plan to do about that if you see a different future for the degree?
Yes, the MBA as a degree has been around now for, roughly 100 years in one way or another, because really with the creation of the business school as we know them, they started, even though the first programs were not necessarily called MBA programs, but they started to see that, okay, for business leaders, we need a certain type of education to really help them grow as leaders, as future leaders. And at the same time, of course, the program and MBA programs in general have been criticized basically in a continuous way for one reason or another. And I think this is good in the sense that there is a lot of public scrutiny on what is actually happening in this area of the educational system. What is actually happening to those people who are MBAs, what are they really doing? Certainly when MBAs come out and kind of bring across, communicate a sense of entitlement, to maybe certain positions or certain rewards before actually having shown any real results through their work. So I expect the MBA program in that sense to be continuously questioned. And that's probably a good thing. At the same time, I see there is a need for leadership education, leadership development that I anticipate to be there pretty much all the time, because we do need good leaders for anything to really work, to improve, for businesses, management in general. And that, I think, is a timeless problem that we will always face. The question is whether the MBA program will be able to provide the relevant knowledge, skills, and attributes of leaders and help leaders develop those attributes so that they can be effective leaders in the future. And as long as that's the case, I'm sure there is a place for MBA education in this world, and there will be a demand for that. Obviously, we need to be careful with respect to what you call the ROI, we need to make sure that it is an affordable education that people can actually do, that makes sense, in the context of the jobs that people are actually getting. But I'm quite optimistic because there is a continuous, and I'm sure there will be a continuous need for good leaders, that there is a place for MBA programs in this world, also in the future. Now, this may mean, obviously, that the contents need to adapt continuously. The circumstances change. There used to be a time maybe when you need to have different organizational skills and learn different organizational skills in MBAs than you need to do now. We just talked about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, I think, is a good example because we have seen in a way that for society and businesses, entrepreneurial skills are key, and therefore a good leader needs to master them, even though he or she may not ever start their own business. So in other words, an MBA program, if it wants to be relevant, needs to actually do something about that. And I'm sure there will be other changes along those lines that we need to pick up on in the different MBA programs to stay relevant. But the leadership question is such, namely, how can I actually be a good leader who can have a positive impact on the organization that I work in, on the people around me? This is a timeless question that will always be there. And I think that's also why in the MBA program, we need to put a lot of emphasis precisely on that question. We need to be top of the line, of course, in knowledge transmission. We need to be top of the line in skills training, but we need to be really, really insisting precisely on that last question, on the meaning that we give to the different things that we do, because that is the continuous question that's always there. And again, if we do this well, I'm sure there will be a place for an MBA program in society.
And my last question is, when you talk about building great leaders, developing great leaders, what is your school's personal philosophy on that? What is a great leader to IESE? Or is there more than one type?
Well, see, in the leadership literature, this question has been, debated a lot. No, like, is there actually a type of leader that we should all aspire to? And then if the answer is yes, you can pull out some examples with real names and say, okay, we want to be like X and Y and Z. Then I think people have found out, and I think we can all identify with this, that there is a lot of context dependence also that's taking place, depending on when and where you are supposed to lead and whom. Obviously, context matters and different skills come into place. We have developed a leadership profile which contains a list of different leadership skills that we find essential. And they precisely the fact that you have different skills on it, so we're talking about, for example, the ability to think critically, to be empathetic, to be humble as a leader, to be communicating well, etc. The fact that there is different skills on this that we think are critical for a successful leader already tells you that I think you have to be, as a good and successful leader, you have to be multifaceted on this. And depending on the context you're in, one skill will become in that context more important than the other. So in that sense, if you say, so what is the type of leader you're trying to develop? I think we're trying to develop a balanced leader at the school, balanced among those different skills. And you could probably summarize it a little bit in a way, if you look related to the mission statement that we actually have. We like to talk about positive impact. In the end, I think it's about having a positive, truly positive impact in the circles around you, meaning the company you work in, society that you're in, and so forth. And for this to be done, again, you need to be able to apply different leadership skills in different moments. But in a way, it's that kind of result, and that you can tell after some time of a leader, a truly positive impact that will tell you whether you have the right leader in front of you.
Great. And do you have any last tips for MBA applicants or candidates thinking about an MBA on just what to think about before they take this big jump in their careers?
Well, I would encourage candidates for an MBA to do two things. Obviously, to do their homework on the different specific aspects of each MBA program. I think there's a lot of information out there that one can consult, a lot of information you can get. But in a second step, I think it is important to get out there and try to reach some people who have actually had some experience at those programs, and to really take a long view, if you can, on this, and say, look, if I look at those people, who they are, what they're doing, and I'm thinking about my own long-term plans, can I identify with this, with those people, with their ideas? Obviously, they're different from who you are. It's not about repeating what other people have been doing. But if you see the people, you probably get a clearer sense of, is this the kind of view I want to develop on the world for the future? And you see yourself where you're going to be maybe 5, 10, 15 years from after doing the MBA program. And you ask yourself, okay, is this, kind of who I want to be after the MBA program? I think I would encourage people, in a second step to actually think about that and look at that.
Professor Franz, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.